Hello everyone, and welcome to our final part in our Nezuko fan art walkthrough. So today we're just going to finish up our Nezuko piece, so we'll do all the rendering on her skin, clothes. I'll walk you through all of that, and just show you what I'm thinking and how I'm doing it. So I'm going to stick to the simple rendering method that I have been showing in some of my previous videos, so you can check out some of my skin rendering tutorials and face rendering tutorials to kind of see what method I'm using. I want to keep it as simple as I can for you guys, so that way for some of the beginners out there, they'll be able to follow along and be able to render their pieces, and it should still look nice once it is all finished up. So the only thing I did off camera here is I did all this pattern on her kimono. Just, it was going to be super tedious, and I didn't feel like elongating any of the parts unnecessarily because they're already pretty long. So I just threw that in. I chose to use a more random pattern than her original pattern just because I was in the mood to. So you'll either like it or hate it, but it is what it is. So from there, I'm just going to hide those layers I did it on. I just basically clipped to the base color layer, used a super dark pink color, and just did all the lines. And really all I was focused on was remembering that the material itself is stretched over her thighs and her chest, and so you just want to try to follow along the body beneath the clothes. So I didn't just do straight lines straight like this. I followed the knee, wrapped around the thigh, and around the hip, and so that's kind of how I got the design. And yeah, so we'll just hide them for right now so they're not in the way when we're actually rendering like the clothing folds, and then we'll put them back in and make sure that they still look nice. So from there, we'll start on our bottom layer here. So again, I like just viewing what I'm coloring here just by flicking on and off the visibility. So this is our skin and little bow thing, hair tie. So from there, I'm just going to take our super soft airbrush. Don't want it too big, don't want it too small. And I'm just going to, again, decrease the brightness of our skin tone, as well as increase the opacity. And so I'm trying to remember, we have a pretty neutral light. It's basically just right above her, looking at her. So I don't want to go too crazy with the shading here. So I'm just going to kind of hit these areas that the light isn't going to be touching. But I don't want to go too crazy. I'm going to leave it kind of neutral. So we'll do that. And I just like working at one thing at a time. So since we're working on her skin right now, we'll just keep that going. So this time I just picked a brighter, less saturated color. And in the parts exposed to the light, we'll touch them with the same airbrush. Like that. And you want these to be really subtle. This is just the base sort of gradient that we're establishing pretty much. So keep it real subtle, and we'll make it pop here soon. So for this first one, I am going to make my airbrush really small. I'm going to brighten it a little bit more. And on her little neckline here, kind of brighten that. I'm going to be using our softening eraser for pretty much all of my erasing during this portion. So just kind of blend that a little bit, because this is showing like the sort of neck tendons that are going to be a little bit more at the forefront. So we're going to brighten them up just a little bit more. We could do that too, super faintly, like on her knuckles, since they kind of poke up. Something like that. Real faint, real subtle. From there, we can do our multiply layer. So I just made a multiply layer. I'm going to use my G pen for the hard shadows, and I just selected the darkest part on our gradient. And again, I don't want this shadow to be too large, just right where her hand's kind of furthest from the light. So something like this. Maybe this little nook right there. Same with right here. Then her hand. Her fingers are bent, so we'll kind of do something like that. And then here I want the shadow to be real thin up here because her sleeve is basically just laying on her arm, so there's not going to be much of a shadow visible from there because it's just laying right on top of her hand there, so we'll keep it thin there. There on her chin. And again, since we have super neutral light, I don't want this shadow to be too big. Same with these ones, something like this. And then we can take our softening brush, or softening eraser rather, and we'll just soften these slightly. You don't want to go too soft with them, but I also don't want them to be quite so hard looking. So I'll do something like that. And then beneath our multiply layer, I'll make another layer with a super bright skin color and just add right in the areas most affected by the light, just basically like a highlight, like that. From there, we'll grab our multiply. Her ear is completely covered, so we'll just completely color that in. And then if I remember right, it's just this hair tie now. So same rules as what we just did for the skin. I'll use a darker, more saturated color first for the sections here that are furthest from the light. Then what I'm going to do is use a small airbrush, use our base color here, just to kind of push back this darker gradient. Just because this bow tie is pretty close. It's pretty close to our light source because it's on top of her head, of course, so we don't want it to be too jarring of a dark gradient. And then on the layer above, we'll brighten up this section here, add a little brightness to this. Oops. Then we'll come up to here, and now what I like to do is I typically use this little brush here. It's called a fire brush soft just because that's what I use it for mostly, but then I found it's actually really nice for doing wrinkles on clothes. But for the sake of this and keeping it simple, I'll just use the base hard shadow brush here. And so from there, what we'll do is we want to use a bright color for the, a little bit brighter. I want to use a bright color for the sort of wrinkles in this. So we'll do something like this. Like so. And then, where's my thing? Is it a smudge tool? No. Where is it? I'm trying to find my, here we go. So we'll come up here to a blend tool, and we'll just kind of push parts of this so it's not quite hard. We don't want these to be like a hard shadow, but on the bright side of things. So we'll just kind of smudge this like that. And then we can use our softening brush, and down here where it's at the darkest, we'll just kind of soften it because we don't want it to be super bright. And then we'll use our multiply layer for the hard shadows, like this, and keeping these pretty soft, just coming into like some of the little nooks here that will be hidden from the light. Something like that. Soften them a little bit. There we go. And then, alright, so that's that layer. Moving on, looks like it's her face, fingernails, and her socks. So, we can do the fingernails first, it'll be fastest. So I'm just gonna start with our multiply layer, select the base color here. Do that. Just because some of these nails are just completely shadowed, so we'll just get them out of the way. From there, we'll go with a relatively bright color to make them look glossy. Add some shine. Then we'll, on another layer, using our hard brush still, add this little dark portion here, just so it looks like the little bit that's, you know, real connected to the finger. Just darken it just a slight bit. And then finally, with a almost white color, just some small hard shadow detail here to really make it look like they're glossy. Something like that. And then for the stockings here, we'll just do the same thing. This time I'm gonna go a little bit more exaggerated on my dark color though, since these are so bright, so I will exaggerate a little bit to get the tone we're looking for. I'll also just, all of this that's beneath these brown pieces of clothing, just hit those with the gradient here. Same with right there. From there, come all the way up at the top, use a large brush right there, make it nice and bright so it looks more white. And then from there I'm going to go all the way white, use my little hard shadow brush, I'm going to make a line right here. So this is where the material is stretched the most. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give it the appearance that you'll see on stockings and make it look like it's actually being stretched a lot because it's a rather tight material. From there, again, we'll use our little blend tool. Actually, about our fingertip. I'm just going to go back and forth like this, and then I'll kind of come in at these parts that kind of got way too high and bring them down a little bit, like so. Then I'll soften the outside here. Like that. And then beneath that, kind of using the same color here, add a bright line like so. Then we can add multiply layer. And so a lot of this is just kind of problem solving on the fly. Like, you'll have an idea in mind of what you want, use the tools available, and go from there. Try to get that design going. So, and I'm trying my best not to use any of my custom brushes, just because I want this to be like a good base sort of follow through, so you can just kind of, you know, download a drawing program, let's say, and just whatever they give you, you can still basically follow along with this. Some of them might be named differently, but you should still be fine to follow along. Because I have some custom brushes that will do that job way better, but for the sake of making it simple for you guys and not showing you where to go and get those in this video and stuff, so I don't want to waste your guys' time with that. So, but I'd be happy to have a video showing some of the custom brushes later. It's just for the sake of this walkthrough, I don't want to take up time doing that. So now we will come up to her head like this, because in some of our more advanced rendering tutorials and stuff, that's when I'll start showing more of the custom brushes. But for the sake of just these super simple, anyone can follow along as long as you have like your art program, then I want these tutorials to be able to cover that, you know. And then in the more advanced ones, we will start implementing custom brushes. I'll show you how to make those or where you can go to download them and just go from there. But basically for a face, just again our dark gradient, just hitting the areas that are going to be away from the light, a little bit here at the eye socket, but not a lot. I found that less is more when it comes to sort of rendering the face of your anime characters. And so I definitely don't want to overdo the face here. So I'll brighten up the little parts there with the eyes, a little bit on her forehead, something like this. Soften just a touch, like so. And then on this layer, we'll come and grab this super bright color and we'll just almost highlight some of the parts here that are closest to the light. So like her nose, her forehead, her eyelids, a little bit here, a little bit on her cheeks as well. And then just sort of use my eraser to blend that better so it's not as jarring. There we go. And then from there, we'll make a new layer here, just because this one we're probably going to decrease the opacity on, because we're going to do the blush next. So now I will grab kind of a reddish pink color, pretty saturated, and then using my lighting brush, just add a little pink to her cheeks, kind of right below her eyes. I don't want to go too crazy with this color. Kind of soften it just a little bit. Then a new layer, I'll take my hard shadow, make it small, and then I'll add the little blush lines, like so. Make a new layer, go super, super bright, and then add some little spots here where she's catching the light and reflecting it. Just makes it kind of pop. Just like that, just on her cheeks and a little bit on her nose. And then we'll go to our multiply layer, grab the darkest part here, cover this ear completely with the shadow, part of this cheek here, and I'm going to keep this, so we're kind of remembering that this hair piece here is kind of above her head, like it's sticking out in front of her a little bit, so the shadow will be a little bit deeper there. Then here at the roots, we don't want anything crazy, because again we're trying to go with like a more neutral light. So we're just gonna add a little bit of shadow here, and a little bit more where her hair is actually sticking out from her head, so it's gonna cast a larger shadow. A little tiny bit there, a little tiny bit here. We'll have most of this ear in the shadow, but not all of it. Something like that. And then add some on that bamboo. Add a tiny little shadow at the bottom of her nose. And then little shadows right here at this little eyelid mark that we made. Like so. And then soften these up like that. Alright, let's see, was that everything on that layer? No, it was not. Okay, so now this little white checkered pattern here, this one will be fairly simple though, so we'll just take our dark color, just try to hit the places where the light's not shining hard on. Then we'll go pretty much just bright white, like so. Because this part on her is like very, very white, this color here. So I just went full white. We'll use our softening eraser on it just a little bit. From there, we can just go straight to our multiply layer. And so her chest is hanging a little bit over this little green part here. So we'll say that it just barely, you'll see the shadow of it on this part. And then this will be covered in a shadow. Well, a very small one though. Very, very tiny shadow here. Then this shadow can be a little bit thicker because it's being cast under this rope thing, this string, like so. And then we'll soften it, like that. Okay. So again, I'm just flicking those, making sure that they are all accounted for, which it looks like they are, except I'm going to use my multiply on these and keep them real dark. Okay, from there, looks like it's these white folds, her little bamboo string thing, and then the red portion. So we'll just finish this middle section right here. So doing the exact same thing. So since this one has two different colors in it, you're basically just trying to keep in mind everything that you just did, because we wouldn't want all of this to be bright and then everything over here to be dark or anything. It's, you know, it's the same sort of shadows are being cast, just they're different colors, so you can't just do them all in one layer. So we'll go relatively bright in this area that's being hit by our light source. Then we'll use a multiply layer and just follow along with the lines and the directions that we were going with our hard shadow. Do something like this. So you're just basically continuing those lines that we made previously. Like that. We'll just shade that whole part there. There we go. Soften. Okay, so from here, again, we'll use our lighting. Well, our airbrush here, our soft brush. We'll go dark first. Make this a little bit bigger though. So right here, these areas would be away from our light source, because this one's going to have, this leg is above this one, so there's going to be dark there, be dark under here, a little bit of darkness right here too. And then just for the gradient of it, these parts here in the light would be like this. Quick take this dark color though, I forgot that this part is also on this layer, so we'll kind of do this too. And then same idea, grab this bright part, put it right here where it's just being hit by the light. From there, new layer, we'll go pretty bright because we can lower the opacity on this layer. And so, you know, worst case scenario, it will, if it's too bright, we'll just lower the opacity because it for sure will be too bright, but this will give us a lot to work with. So I'm just basically following these wrinkles in the material, like so. And then using our blending brush here, we'll soften these up just a little bit. Like this. just so they're not jarring. It's not, because if we were doing something like a hard material or something that's really reflective of the light, like something shiny, then you could use like hard highlights for this if you wanted. But for just trying to show the wrinkles in the clothes, we don't want it to be a super jarring like highlight. We kind of just want it to be soft, since this is just made out of cloth. So something like that. Then we'll take our multiply, grab our darkest color, and we'll fill in these little spots here. So again, remember our knee is above it, so we'll add a little bit there. Fill those in. Then we'll do this. And again, just try to envision where your light source is, so that way your shadows make sense. So we're gonna add a little bit there at the bottom, and we'll add some good shadow right there. A little bit here, and then we'll soften these. And then from there, we'll add a little bit here, just kind of shadowed from her head and hair, kind of covering all this area here, so it'll be a little bit of a shadow there. Little tiny bit there, right here. Nothing crazy though. And then we want to do basically the same thing, just up here now. And this is a pretty small piece, so I'm going to use small brush. First do my dark section for my gradient, then we'll do a bright color for where the light is touching. From there, I will just use a bright color here for the folds. And then, again, using our little blend brush, just kind of soften those up a little bit. Then use a multiply layer. And just remember where your shadows are from the hair following on our skin, so we can kind of shade these. So since we've got a shadow coming through right here, we can just go ahead and just follow that right there. Add some little shadows from the wrinkles, like that. What else? Okay, that looks like everything on this layer. And if we want, we can make this pop a little bit more, because again, this is pretty much a white color due to the little reference photo I've got. So it'll take pretty much a white, use our hard shadow here, kind of large, and just add sort of a highlight here, so we can kind of make the material here look a little bit glossy. Then smudge all of this, well, blend it, and then soften it, so that way it adds just a little touch of a highlight right there, like that. From there, it's like the kimono and this dark part. So I'm right here. We'll do this dark section first. So using a large airbrush, just do our little gradient again. So we'll have one at the bottom, one at the top for our dark gradient, since the leg above us is casting a shadow, and then on the underside of the leg is furthest from the light. So this time I'll kind of put in a bright spot separately, not just all the way down, so that way, since this material is kind of puffy, and you know, like this section right in here is going to be a little bit darker than the bright spots here, so if we just went straight over, it would just kind of blend it all together, which I don't really want to do. from there, I'll just go right away into making our wrinkle sort of details. So we'll do small for these ones, like this, and then larger for these ones. Like so. Then again, we'll use our little blending tool. And for these, don't just push them straight down like this, but kind of fan them out as you exit. So it kind of does something like this. That way it looks like the material is, you know, wrinkling and then sort of flattening itself back out as it goes. Otherwise we would just have one long wrinkle, you know. Let's kind of do this. And again, this tool gets the job done, but it's not my preferred tool for this. So in our advanced, well, I guess not advanced, but our like intermediate tutorials, that's when we'll showcase the brushes that do this job really well, but they're custom brushes, so it would take me time to walk you through where to get them and how to make them, which I don't want to do during this little walkthrough. So we'll do that. And then, so again, this little invisible layer here is all of my little marks right here. So above that, we're going to put in our multiply layer. Grab this dark part here, and then do this. So these little folds that kind of stick up, they're not going to have as far reaching of a shadow because they're closer to the object that's actually casting the shadow. So what we'll do is the areas that aren't wrinkled, they'll be a little bit further reaching of a shadow. Whereas the closer you get, the less shadow is cast. It has less time to travel, so it doesn't get quite as large. So we'll just do this. Just use my fill bucket, and then just do the detail work here. I'll kind of follow this a little bit. And then from there, we can kind of do this. Like so. Then like that. Then we'll fill in little parts of this since they get smaller as they go down, so there's going to be a little bit of shadow in between. And then we just want to soften this shadow a little bit, like so. And then from there, we can work on the kimono. So, just like always, we'll start with the dark part of our gradient. And since this is such a large part of her, we'll go relatively large with our initial airbrush. Like so. Then we'll just select the base color so we can fight back this shadow gradient where it's necessary, like on her chest, like this. Then we can take the actual bright color of our gradient, right on the areas closest to the light, like so. A little bit there, a little bit here. And we'll soften this one up here, like so. From there, we'll just do a really bright portion right here, where her chest is really catching the light, along with right there. soften that up a little bit so it's not jarring. Then we'll grab our multiply. And again, following the same shadow line that we've been working on with this middle part here, we'll do that. We'll add a shadow beneath this part. And then this shadow is being cast from her cloak thing. So again, where the material is closest to the kimono here, it's not going to have like a visible shadow beneath it. We'll do that. Her hair here is casting a little bit of a shadow. Up by a little bit right there. We'll add a tiny shadow right here just to show that this, part of the kimono is over that part. Add a little bit of shadow here, kind of on the, I guess not that deep, kind of on the bottom portion of her chest. And then just add a tiny little shadow right here. And then basically just do the same thing up here. Fill in this shadow. Make sure it's filled in all the way. Like so. Now I'll use my little lasso tool and kind of fight back right here. Got a little too big. Then just smooth it out. Like so. And then make sure that we shade this. And then we'll soften these up like this. And then, so see, since we put the multiply layer on top of this little layer here, it'll make them darker too. So all this little detail here will also be darkened. Because if they stayed the same color, then it would look kind of odd. Because it would look like it gets brighter as it gets into darker portions, which we don't really want. Then, what we'll do is right here, again, take our super bright portion and just barely, right there where it's at its brightest, I'll lower the opacity just so it looks like those lines are getting brightened up a little bit too. Same with right here. Okay. There we go. So from there, now looks like the other leg and that inside portion. So we'll leave that inside portion alone because we already accounted for it being darker. And the nice thing here with this leg is that we can just use our previous colors. So we'll just basically repeat what we did on that other leg. So we'll start with our dark gradient, then we'll grab this brighter gradient right here on these pieces. And then this one doesn't have any just like obvious wrinkles, but we'll still add a little bit of pop to it where it's closest to our light. So we'll take those, grab this, and again kind of just smudge it around here. Because this way it'll make it look a little bit textured too. Because if we just went super airbrushy, it doesn't really look textured. It just looks kind of washed. And we kind of want to make the cloth look like it's an actual, material and not really just like a smooth reflective surface or anything. So this is nice for just adding some overall, like an actual material feel to the clothes. So that's why I'm still adding a little bit of a highlight and then smudging it out, because then it adds some kind of grit to it, and it's not just like an airbrush, So from there, do our multiply layer, and I'm going to come up into these little nooks here, because again, these kind of stack on top of each other from top down. So this will have a little bit of shadow too. And then we'll fill these in, make sure that they're detailed properly. Like this. add a tiny bit right here. And then soften. There we go. Soften a little bit more. I want it to be pretty much the same as the leg beneath it. So we'll do that. And then we'll move on. So it looks like it's this green part, the bamboo, and then the bottom portion of her kimono. So we'll do the bamboo first. Again, we'll do a gradient. And it looks like in the little reference photo I've got, this bamboo is rather, like, reflective. So we'll add some texture to it, and then we'll probably do some highlight too, just so that way it kind of keeps that reflective nature that my reference photo seems to have. So we'll do this. Make sure I'm saving as I go. Don't think I've saved once. That would be tragic if this file got corrupted. From there, we'll grab this dark portion. So I'm on my hard shadow brush here, and I'm gonna just kind of add some grainy texture here, like so. Then I will use my smudge brush, well, I guess my blend brush. Blend these a little bit. Because again, I just want to establish that there's like a wood grain to this, and not that it's just like a piece of plastic or something. So I'll do that. And then soften that. And then we're basically going to do the exact same thing, but now with a brighter color. So I don't want that dark color all the way up here at the top, and in the same vein, I don't want my super bright color all the way at the bottom, because this is more reflective of the light, whereas this is a little bit more shadow cast. So we'll come here to the blend tool, just do the same thing, just sort of blend this just to add a texture, soften it a little bit. So now that we've got what appears to be a textured piece, now we can come up here to, I guess we can just do our multiply layer. So we'll actually move this layer above that invisible one, because again, this is our lines in the bottom portion. So we'll put our multiply layer above it, and we'll grab the darkest color here, and we'll just put some slight shadow at the bottom here, which would be away from the light, like so. Add a little tiny bit right there so that this is casting. Do that, soften it up a little bit. From there we can add a little bit of highlights here, so we'll come to our lighting brush with a brighter color, and just right here on these little like bulging things, we'll kind of highlight them with an airbrush. Soften the bottom of it so it blends a little bit nicer, and then kind of just add a slight highlight there so it looks like it's reflecting the light a little bit. There we go. Okay, so from there we will do this cloth portion here. So a lot of this is kind of like, it's underneath this little middle portion, and it's also underneath her chest, so a lot of this is going to be shadowed over. So do that, we'll grab our base color. So instead of really using a highlight color here for the bright gradient, it's like we're not going to go brighter than the base color here. We're just going to basically, over all of our wrinkles, just make them a little bit brighter. Like that. So then we'll come up here. Now we'll go a little bit brighter for the actual wrinkles. And again, I'm going to kind of the further we get from the little wrinkle line, the more that they're gonna fan outwards. So it looks like it's distributing itself into the flatter portions. Then we'll take our little blend brush, like so. There we go. Then we'll soften it a little bit, because again, since these are kind of cast by these, like pretty much all of this is gonna be like have a shadow cast over it. We don't want this to be super bright, because of course we're gonna put our multiply layer above it, but we also don't want the parts that maybe aren't hit by a shadow to just be like super overly bright. So this little knot here sticks out a little bit more, so we'll have it actually not completely covered in shadow. So we'll do something like that over here, because again, if you notice that we've got our shadow cast right here, it's like this is, you know, beneath that material, so it definitely is going to be cast over this. So then we'll around this wrinkle here, not that much though, like so. Soften it up just a touch. There we go. And then last part for this is going to be the bottom portion of our kimono. So again, just do our dark gradient first. We'll go pretty big on the airbrushes here, like so. And then this middle section here, so remember this leg is above the other, so we'll do this. And then again, I'm just going to take the actual base color and then fight back our little darker gradient on this thigh, because it doesn't need to be riding up this thigh. Kind of right here. We'll do the same. Right here, we don't want it to be over dark down there. Something like that. He's kind of a larger one here. Alright, so from there, we'll take our base, a brighter color, go really big here, like so. Just brighten up the sections that are going to be hit by the light. And we'll go a little bit smaller for this in the hips, like that. Okay. From there, we'll go super bright, kind of like a highlight almost. Just right here, where she's most hit by the light. Same with a little bit on her knees, even a little bit on this thigh. And then we'll soften it near the shadow so it doesn't just become too bright right away. Alright, so from there, we can do this. So now we'll work on our wrinkles. So we'll take a bright color, and we'll follow this one up like this. And again, I'm gonna fan it out as it exits our little wrinkle line. Like so. Then she's got little ones at her hips. Then we'll take our blending tool, kind of follow that fan. We'll even have this part come out like that. so. Then use our shadow, or our eraser here, like that. Then finally we'll add a little bit of highlight here. Just like this, where she's closest to the light. Like that. And then do our multiply layer. So again, just grab our darkest color. And then just try to envision where the shadows would be cast. Something like this. I have a relatively large shadow over here. Like this. And then a little bit of a shadow cast right here. And I do want to have like a more comprehensive guide to like shading and like rendering clothes, really. So we will do that later, but again, I was just working on a fan art batch and I thought this might be a fun idea to kind of just follow along with it and just see the process using the sort of beginner techniques that I've already shown. Or I should say beginner friendly techniques. There we go. So later there'll be a more in-depth sort of tutorial on how to render clothing. But for right now, hopefully this is easy enough to kind of get the idea. So then we'll make those materials visible again. And then we'll take the super bright portion, and just like what we did before, just ever so slightly where it's brightest, come over this just so that way they kind of get a little bit brighter, like that. Maybe even a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so from there, I think that's all on that layer, yeah. Okay, so this is already pretty much as dark as we want, but we do want to add the wrinkles. So again, just taking a bright color, fill in these little wrinkly spots, fan it out as it comes out of the sort of shoot there. Take our blend tool, kind of large, fan them out as we go, like so. And then I'll erase those because we don't want them super visible, because it's not that like light is hitting them, but we want to still show that there's wrinkles there even though it's going to be pretty dark in the material behind her. From there we'll do this. So what I'll do is, again, showing that this is like a wood grain, I'll kind of in a circular motion just add in some of these, soften it, use a light airbrush this middle portion here, and then I'll just use a multiply layer for the shadow that'd be cast by this thing, like that. A little tiny bit down here too. Then soften that. Alright, there we go. Now it looks like this string, and just a string, so we will take our dark airbrush and then kind of hit that where it's going to be furthest from the light, just like normal. Then we'll brighten it in the areas that will be touched by the light, including on this knot. And then we want to give this a rope texture, because it's kind of like a string, but it's the same color as a rope, so we'll just give it a rope texture here. I'm just going to take our hard airbrush that is, and just kind of scratch in like this. That. Then, we'll take our blend brush and just swooping over the whole thing like this. Blend it enough so that you can tell that it's textured, but it's not like a jarring, popping texture. Just want to give the impression that it's textured. And then we'll shade our knot first. Like so. And then that's that. Now this coat thing. So we'll take the dark color here. And then just up here where the hair is, as well as just kind of this piece that kind of falls behind her. We'll add some shadow. Like so. Then we'll take a bright color, the sections that are going to be hit by the light, like this. And then a little bit right here too. Then we'll take, again for our little wrinkles, just a brighter color here. Follow along these wrinkles. Like so. Then we'll even do some like sort of highlight here on this portion. Oops. On this portion that kind of sticks out. Like that. A little bit here too. Then we'll take our blending tool. Like so. Soften the areas here, blend this, and then again soften. Same thing here. There we go. Then we'll use a multiply layer, grab our dark portion here. So under this hair strand, kind of right in here too. Part that goes behind the sleeve. Like this. This whole part will just shadow. There we go. Cast a little shadow from that. Do this. Oops. From there. add a little bit of a shadow here, and then soften. Oops. This has to get shadowed too. Like that. There we go. And then, I think it's just the back portion here, which we will just, for this piece, just use a multiply layer, like this. And we'll just kind of drop in the rest of our shadows real quick, just since we're already here. And then for this, instead of really bothering with a gradient, I'll just put in the clothing wrinkles. This is a small part that's behind her, so we don't really need to go too crazy with the details. Like that. There we go. Alright, so now it looks like we're on to the hair. So, using the same methods that I've been showing in our tutorials, we'll just come up here, grab our hard shadow, go a little bit bright, because since she's got such dark hair, we're not going to really mess with darkening anything, so we'll just go with brighter sort of highlights here. So, and then we'll take our blending tool and blend parts of this. We don't want to over blend it because we still want it to look like these are strands of hair that are just reflecting light. So we don't want to over blend it, but we also don't want it to be so sharp. Something like that. Then we'll come in with a brighter spot and just real small in this brightened portion. Basically just add a little bit of a highlight effect. Then again, just blend it a little bit. And then we'll take a dark color here. And we'll add like the hair strands. So you don't have to do this part if you don't want. It's not super ultra visible anyways, but for me it just kind of adds a texture to it. Makes it look a little bit more like hair and not just like something just on her head. So we'll add the little strands. This. And kind of curve it around her head too. Like you don't want to just make them just straight lines. You want to follow the flow of the hair. Same with the roots. And then we'll just use our softening eraser for the areas that are highlight or like more bright. And then for this, I'll use a multiply layer, like so. We'll use our airbrush, and we'll just basically darken the parts of her hair that are behind her head and stuff, like so. Soften that up a little bit. Then we'll take our eraser with a small section to make sure these hair strands out in front aren't shadowed. so. And then I'll add one more sort of layer here, and with our airbrush, just kind of brighten up the top of her head. There we go. Alright. So now we want to mess with these orange pieces, which I think really all I'm going to do, because if you look at her reference photo, or if you just look at a reference photo of Nezuko, you'll see it's like pretty abrupt change from black to orange, so I don't think that these are necessarily terrible the way that they are, but I do want to blend them just a little bit, just so it's a little bit more of a smooth transition. And then using our softening brush, soften them up like this, and then we'll basically just do that exact same thing on our darker orange for the parts of the hair that are kind of twisted and folded, like so. Go. And then I think all I'm going to really do then is add just some little hair strand texture in the orange parts. Not going to go with too many, because I don't want it to really get into the black and just have orange pieces like that. Then we'll do the same over here. Just follow the flow of the hair, like so. There we go. And now, I think we're onto the eyes. So, all I'm going to do for this is for the whites, I'm going to select the base color. I'm going to come down here a little bit, take my G pen, make this a multiply layer. And we don't want the shadow from her eyelids to be too crazy, or from her like eyelashes. So we'll just do something like that. Soften just a touch. Right here, this eyebrow is going under the hair, so we'll kind of hit it with some multiply as well, so it looks like it's actually underneath of it. From there, we'll go on to the eye. So again, the only thing I did is I took this base lighting brush and I increased the brush density, so that way it just does what the lighting brush does a little bit faster. So then we will take a dark color here, and we're going to first make a gradient on our eye, like so. Then we'll go really dark right up here under the eyelashes themselves. Then on a new layer, we'll go for a bright color like this. And now, go super bright and super pink. And now we just kind of want to make them a little bit pinker here. These outside edges too. Then we'll soften it near the top. And then it looks like she's got kind of, not really like pupils, but kind of just a darker spot where her pupils would be. So we'll just take our darkest color from the gradient, put it like this. And then what I'm gonna do is grab this pink color on a color dodge layer and make this pink not only brighter, but also pop a little bit more. Like that. And then I'll take this color, use some hard shadow. We're adding a little bit of sort of sparkle in the eye. Just using little circles here to show this. Then I'll erase them as they get closer to the gradient. And then from there, I'll add a little bit of like a blue color that's even brighter inside some of these big circles. Then finally, we'll do a multiply layer, grab this dark color, follow the shade from our eyelid. Like so. And then beneath that multiply layer, we'll take another color dodge, grab this pink color, take our soft shadow brush, or lighting brush, add a little bit of pink, a little bit of purple this other side. Very, very faint though, we don't want it to get too bright. And then I'll kind of use my softening eraser at the top here, like that. Then above everything, we'll come up here to a add layer with our hard shadow, and we'll add in some little spots here where light is cast over, just like that. And then from here, we're pretty much done. Something that I like to do, just to kind of add a more atmospheric tone to your picture, you can come over here, right click. Doesn't look like OBS is picking this up, but if you right click, it'll open up a little window, and then on a new correction layer, you can come to a color balance, and so that'll open up a little wheel, so you'll have kind of a cyan to red, magenta to green, and yellow to blue, like sort of balance. And all I'm gonna do is ever so slightly, and when I mean slight, I mean like nothing is above a 5 or even -5, just add a little bit of a color change here. So I have like 2 points in the blue, 1 point towards magenta, and then 3 points towards red. So what that does is that you can see if I click it on and off, it's barely a noticeable change, but it'll kind of help add an atmospheric tone to the overall picture. So if you were to make something like, let's say there's fire burning around them, instead of really having to focus on every single color, like your base color, to account for that red tone, you can basically render your character like normal and then use a color balance to really enhance the overall atmosphere on your character. So if there's like fire burning, you can make them a little bit more red. If you have like a night portrait where maybe things are a little bit more of like a cold blue color, you could add that into, just to ensure that your character's popping and looks like they're a part of the scene you're drawing and not just somebody standing in a scene. So since we're just have like a blank background, you don't really have to go anything too crazy with that color balance, but to me it just kind of still adds just a little bit of pop to help smooth everything out a little bit more. So we went for a very low noticeable one, but without it, it's just a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit different. If you either like it or you don't, it's up to you. But either way, that will conclude it. These are all kind of long videos, so I'm sorry about that, but it takes a while to draw these, and especially when I'm kind of talking you through the process. I will, in the future, have more tutorials for posing and for the actual rendering of materials such as clothes. I'll also have some more intermediate level rendering tutorials, so then we can get into more custom brushes and how to do that. But for right now, I just thought it'd be fun to kind of walk you through the process and just kind of show you what I'm thinking about and how I sort of go through the process of one of the fan arts. And I try my best to just use the base brushes and stuff that you're given if you have something like Clip Studio Paint. So it should be something that you can just follow along with right away. But either way, hopefully you found this helpful or interesting, and I will see you in the next one.